We are welcoming Reverend Pat Zogar today. Pat is from, as I mentioned, Vancouver Island. We're delighted to have her here. Her topic is Diagnosis Divinity. And I'm just going to say a couple of things about Pat that were in our newsletter. She was appointed as spiritual leader in 1999 of Positive Living Center in Victoria and ordained by Jackie Darby. And in 2008, she answered a call to co-pastor at the Center for Conscious Living in Winnipeg. So she has moved around and is a religious science practitioner and minister, serving 3 years in Winnipeg and 2 years in Kamloops. Then she said she was going to retire, but she kind of lied in the big scheme of things. She knew that over the next year or two that she was not done yet. And as she says in her bio, on April Fool's Day in 2016, she was appointed a minister, ushering in many changes and bringing in many parts together of the unity communities of Victoria, Comox Valley, and Nanaimo. We wish you a very welcome to our center, Patricia, and we'll have you come on and I'll stop the share so you can share your slides. And just for some information, Patricia was interviewed on Out of My Mess this week. So if you want to go back Facebook or YouTube, it was wonderful to hear her background and her story. I'll leave it with you, Patricia. Thank you.
Me too. Probably, I think I screwed it up.
It looks perfect to me.
Oh, can you hear me?
Can hear you loud and clear.
Okay, I thought I was muted and I couldn't find my buttons. Okay, good morning, everyone. Thank you for inviting me to be with you this morning. It's such a delight to be able to share with people across the country. As you know, on Vancouver Island, we also have come together, 3 centers. We have one of our centers has a bit of an advantage that we can still meet in person, but we do a lot of Zoom stuff too. So, Diagnosis Divinity. You know, when you go to your doctor for something and she actually finds something, actually gives you a bit of a diagnosis, and how excited that is? Because usually by the time you get to the doctor, everything you thought was wrong is cleared up, if you're like me, right? So you get that little thrill of excitement, that little triumphant, yes, I knew there was something wrong with me. And then you know how when the doctor sends you for blood tests and you wait for the blood test to come back from the lab. And you know how nowadays you can go directly online to the lab and get your results in real time as soon as they're available, even before the doctor gets them. And you know how when you're reading down your results and you see that little red mark that denotes that something is just not quite right, just a little bit higher, just a bit lower than normal bounds. And that gets really interesting. Doesn't it get interesting when you see that? So what's the first thing you do? You're like me, you go on Google, right? You have to research this. What result is this? What disease does this signify? So for instance, suppose your results came back as maybe your potassium is a little bit high and your white blood count's just a little bit low. So you go on Google and you say, tell me about elevated potassium levels. And then you say, tell me about white blood count. And then you said, please tell me what disease has elevated potassium and low white count. And I start to get ideas. And then you check those diseases out and you find out what else those diseases have. What other, oh yes, I have a little bit of that too, right? And you get working it and you start clicking on Google and clicking on the links and going down a rabbit hole until finally you have diagnosed yourself with that specific disease that has elevated potassium and low white blood count. Anyone ever done that one? Got that diagnosis? Well, a diagnosis is the process of identifying a disease, condition, or injury by its signs and symptoms. And you are excited because you have diagnosed yourself. Yay, diagnosis me. And then what happens is your doctor calls, right, to go over your results with you. And the you're prepared to tell the doctor already what the diagnosis is, but the doctor says, okay, your results look pretty good. Yeah, your potassium's a little high, so I'd suggest you stop eating bananas and we'll check that again in a year. And you say to yourself, what? Is that it? Is that all? I wanted a diagnosis. Reminds me of the hypochondriac whose headstone read, see, I told you I was sick. Oops, oh, we're way out of order here. Okay, there we go. I'd like to ask you to spend a few minutes just looking, just observing these people and noticing what responses you have to them, what assumptions you make about them, what judgments you make, if any. Just observing your reactions and your opinions of these folks. I have had many people come to me and sounds like proudly announcing that I have been diagnosed as. And they take that diagnosis and they immediately, metaphorically, of course, like write it on a sticky note and paste it on their chest right where their labels should be, where their name tag should be. And they end up walking around behind this label on their chest that goes sick person, and that's how we see them, right? Oh, I always have my mouse in the wrong place. I'm getting there. So with these labels now added, notice whether it revises your thoughts about that person. Now, what do you think? Now, how do you act differently? Notice if your opinions are changed. So a label is a classifying phrase or name applied to a person or thing, especially one that is inaccurate or restrictive. Can you see how these labels would restrict anyone? So we have labeled people being labeled as a disease. Oh, there's diabetic, arthritic, cancer. And it's not just the big heavy-duty diseases. We seem to want to label everyone. ADHD, on the spectrum, bipolar, fibromyalgia, whatever it is. And it becomes the defining characteristic when we're talking to them or about them. So, my mouse is not working. So, let's stop assisting people to restrict themselves by refraining from labeling people or identifying them as their diagnosis or by their diagnosis. Let's put that aside. But what about when it's us? What about when it's me that has the diagnosis or the label? How often do we immediately start to identify ourselves that way? We walk around with our diagnosis in front of us. So when we get a diagnosis, what do? Well, if you're like me, the first thing you do is worry, right? Anybody ever worried about a diagnosis? I have a favorite saying, worry is like a rocking chair. It'll keep you busy, but it ain't gonna get you anywhere. I found this quote, worry not only negates our prayer, but is actually a prayer in itself. You may know the song, Our Thoughts Are Prayers, and we are always praying, right? And we strive to kind of pray without ceasing, that is, be in that place of consciousness when we're always connected. But in actuality, we are all praying without ceasing, because every thought, every word we think is a prayer. It is creating our reality. So let's not worry. Let's not worry be the way we handle our disease. So I want to share with you a few things from my life experience that you might relate with and you might not, but I think there's a lesson in each one of them. So a few years ago, I was diagnosed. They found a small cancer on my kidney. And the doctor assured me that it was very small, was easily removed laparoscopically, and she would book up a surgery appointment and call me with the time. So a couple of days later, the receptionist did call and gave me the surgery date. And she said to me, "Would you please come into the office? The doctor would like to speak with you." That's never good. The doctor wants to speak with me. And she gave me an appointment to see the doctor 2 weeks later. Well, of course, that got me thinking. And of course, immediately I had started to research kidney cancer on my computer. And I found that that kidney cancer most often metastasizes to the lung. Come to think of it, I had a few twinges in my chest lately, and I would at Google spent a lot of time researching cancer dutifully. And I had 2 weeks to do that before I talked to the doctor. So by the time I got those 2 weeks had passed, I was experiencing more and more discomfort in my chest, and I was more and more concerned. So by the time I went in, I was kind of in trepidation. But the doctor looked up from her desk and she said to me, "Oh, hi, thanks for coming in. I wanted to ask you to write a letter to the Ministry of Health because I think it's obscene that you had to wait 8 weeks for cancer surgery." And I said, "What? That's it? You'll put me through 2 weeks to worry for that?" Of course, she didn't put me through anything, but that's where I was at the time. So guess what? Those chest pains, which had been getting worse and worse day by day, totally disappeared, instantly disappeared. And that was a wake-up call to me. I realized what I had been doing. So I turned my attention to what I knew how to do, to affirm divine health and affirm my body's natural ability to heal itself. Guess what? When they diagnosed the cancer, it was 1 centimeter in size. When they took it off, it was 0.7 centimeters in size. So I often wonder if I had trusted, if I had really trusted and just kept affirming, perhaps that surgery wouldn't have been necessary. But there are so many ways that we can react to our diagnosis, isn't there? Sometimes we react, sometimes we respond. Responding is a more conscious way of choosing to be. So sometimes there's an actual benefit or a payoff to being sick. Again, I tell you this because I know it from my own experience. Payoffs. I come from a long line of world-class hypochondriacs, and our health is the topic of conversation at every gathering. We are so interested in talking about our illnesses, comparing them, even competing with them. "I got that flu last week. I was in bed for 5 days." And somebody else said, "I was in bed for 7 days and I still feel like crap." No, it's always bigger, harder, longer, worser. It's not a competition. "Oh, Susie gets another gold medal for the best flu of the year." Don't let your 15 minutes of fame be about how sick you are. So payoffs. Benefits. You get a lot of attention. That's the big one. And I think you should respect the opinion the doctors give you. And you should be responsible about how you share that diagnosis and how you've accepted it. You should probably tell certain people who are likely to be directly involved, but not everybody. Don't allow your life to be all about that. I have an example. I was a young man in a play I was directing one time, and he was something of a strange young man, a little standoffish. And he asked me one day, could he speak to the cast? And what he told us was that he had been diagnosed with Tourette's syndrome. And he explained that that would occasionally cause him to shout out an inappropriate word. It didn't happen often, usually only when he was cold, but he just felt that we should know about it so that if something happened during rehearsal, it wouldn't be a big issue. And the cast was wonderful. You know, they just received the information. They watch out for him. If the window was open, did he need a sweater? But, you know, he never mentioned it again. He didn't think he needed special treatment, and he didn't think his life didn't go around explaining how difficult his life was. It was just, he told us that because he thought we might need to know, and it was never mentioned again. That's responsible sharing about your disease. So the being sick and having a diagnosis is a great way to get a lot of attention. And again, from my own experience, I recognize the truth of that. See, my mother had always wanted to be a nurse, but she was pulled out of school at age 14 to go and work as a domestic because she had a large family and they needed that extra income. But when she got married and had babies, she took a Red Cross home nursing course. And whenever babies got sick, she got to be nurse. So I was especially helpful to my mom because I got rheumatic fever. So there can also be a reward to illness. We can also have our illnesses be a reward both for ourselves and for others. So I rewarded my mother by being sick so she could get to play nurse. Rheumatic fever meant staying in bed for 3 months, having 4 aspirins every 4 hours around the clock, and lots of attention from my mom. And I know this is ironic and really weird, but one of my fondest memories that I remember often is being really sick, really feverish, really nauseated, my mother's cold, cold hand on my forehead, holding my head while I threw up. Now, how's that for a fond memory? Plus, my teacher came to the house to visit me and brought me some assignments. There's a reward. Plus, a little boy came to the house and brought me a letter from each and every one of my classwork. That's a reward. Wasn't I special? All this attention from my mom and from other people. So I rewarded my mom by being sick so she could nurse me, and I rewarded myself. Because that way my other sisters were in school and I got my mother all to myself all day long for 3 months. It's easy to allow an illness to make you think that you deserve special treatment, or that now you have an excuse to do something or not to do something. That's handy, isn't it? Especially if you have a chronic illness that flares up once in a while. You get an invitation you don't want to accept. Oh, I'm sorry, my diagnosis has flared up again. Rewards, payoffs. And even punishment. I have heard a lot of people say, as soon as people found out I had cancer, they stopped associating with me. Nobody ever came to visit me. Could it be because you never stopped complaining about having cancer and demanding extra treatment? Often, we aren't even aware that we're punishing people by the way we use our diagnosis almost as a weapon. Subconscious, of course. We wouldn't consciously make those connections, but the subconscious mind has its little messages. Another one, when I was 4, my father and I were cleaning up in the basement and yard of a house that we were going to be moving into. My father was in the basement. I could see him through the window down at the bottom of the coal chute. I was at the window. There was a bushel basket full of trash in front of me, and there was a piece of paper in front of the bushel basket on the ground. I bent down to pick it up. I did not see a very large triangle of broken window and gashed my arm very severely. Now, my father was a large man in those days. He did not move quickly, but he came roaring up the stairs pretty fast, ripping off his shirt. He wrapped my arm in his shirt. He carried me to the car. He carried me into the doctor's office. By then, the shirt was dripping blood. There was a bunch of people in the doctor's office. But this nice lady stood up and said, "You can go right in." Boy, was I special. I became quite accident prone after that. And at one time, I could count 21 scars on my right forearm alone. So I often think back and wonder if every accident, every cut, even surgery cuts to my body, was in some way trying to punish my father or to get my father's attention. Just an observation that, kind of, you see these things once you're through that, but it's interesting to reflect on what the payoffs and benefits might have been. So oh dear. I practiced changing my mind. Anyway, when I began my journey into New Thought and taking personal responsibility and knowing about cause and effect and our thoughts creating our reality, I started to wonder if I couldn't stay healthier and heal my body more by maintaining a positive attitude and toward not just my body, but my life in general, and knowing much more productive ways to get attention. That's why I go on stage. Today, I am remarkably healthy, quite remarkably, given that I'm old and all that. Diagnosis. Diagnosis is the process of identifying disease, condition, or injury from its signs and symptoms. Prognosis is a forecast of the likely course of a disease or ailment. The likely course. But that's somebody else's opinion. It's not yours. That's where our teaching comes in. You don't have to accept anybody else's opinion. You choose how you will respond to any situation. It's your choice. I don't know whether any of you know Reverend Dr. Gail Musio. She's in Victoria. Her husband, John, had a massive, massive stroke. And Gail was in the hospital room with her. The doctor came in and invited Gail out into the hall to talk. Gail stood her ground. She stood by John's bed, held his hand and said, we will talk here. And so he pronounced that it was a massive stroke, that he would not walk again, he would not talk again. Gail looked him in the eye and she said, "I don't think you know who you're talking to." John fully recovered, and John and Gail are traipsing all around the world now, enjoying a life of travel. So you make up your mind how you're going to respond. And one last story that demonstrates to me I'm going the right way. I promise I'm not. There it is. There it is. I call it a tale of two cancers. So Shelley and Nancy were two congregants at one time, many years ago. Shelley called me one day and said, "I've been walking in the mall and I came across a mental health booth. And so I took a test and I have been diagnosed as at least moderately clinically depressed." I don't know about you, but I do not need to take a test to know when I'm depressed. But anyway, Shirley clung to that diagnosis, Shelley. And then a couple of weeks later, she called me and she said, "I really, really hate my job." In fact, the word she used is, "My job, this job is killing me, Pat." And I suggested perhaps she could look at other jobs, but no, she was too loyal to her boss. And then a couple of weeks later, Shelley called me and she said, "I have breast cancer." She said, "They haven't found it yet, but I'm a medical intuitive, so I know I have breast cancer." And she did find a small lump and went to her doctor, and he took a needle biopsy, which was negative. And she insisted upon another one. So he did a repeat needle biopsy, which was also negative. And she insisted upon a surgical biopsy. They did a surgical biopsy, and of course, she had cancer. And when she called me, this is how she announced it. And it's the most aggressive type, too. Yay, I win. Her reaction was, I'm going into battle mode. So she did. She had surgery, radiation, chemotherapy, everything. And she asked for a healing circle. So we got 30 people together. We sat in a circle. We all did prayers and affirmations and treatments for Shirley. We did energy work. It was a beautiful evening. Shelley had been a hippie who had lived in a commune, earning her living mending fishing nets on the dock. She was not a girly girl, but she showed up to this healing circle with her hair elegantly styled, her face beautifully professionally made up, wearing a floor-length midnight blue velvet gown. She had for each and every one of us a long-stemmed red rose and a personalized thank you card. She was absolutely magnificent. It was her 15 minutes of fame for sure. About a week after that, she stopped letting anyone hug her. And then she stopped coming to service fairly quickly. And then she refused all visitors except myself and our singer. And then in about a week, her husband phoned and she was gone. Shelley was 54 years old. And then there's Nancy. Nancy was also a congregant. She called me one day. She said, my doctor's office has just called. They told me to go to the emergency room. Go now, do not pack a bag, just go. I said, I'll meet you there. So we got to the emergency room and the doctor informed her that her blood was full of calcium, which meant her bones were breaking down, which meant she had bone cancer. So they called her in to get her started, set her up with an oncology, do the confirming tests, set her up with a social worker because she was not going to be able to live alone again. He said, tomorrow we will do a bone marrow biopsy. And he left the room. So Nancy and I talked for quite a while about her body. She said, I'm 78 years old. I've had a wonderful life. If this is my time, I'm fine with that. And we talked about her body and we did treatment and prayer and we sent loving, wrapping all her little cells in love and all that good stuff. And I said, I'll see you tomorrow. When I went back the next day after she'd had the bone marrow transplant, she greeted me with, well, now that wasn't so bad. Everybody's so afraid of bone marrow, and that's not that painful. And these technicians, they're so well trained and so thoughtful and so kind, and everybody's treating me so well, and the food is very good. I've been in that hospital, but okay. So while we were there, the doctor came in and he said, I'm terribly sorry, but we're very confused. The bone marrow biopsy is not giving what we anticipated seeing there. So I'm sorry to tell you, but tomorrow we're going to have to book you for a kidney punch biopsy. She said, fine. I said, I'll see you tomorrow. The next night I went back, it was the same story. Everything was wonderful and everybody was treating her well. And the doctor came in and again apologized that they had not got the result they needed from the kidney punch biopsy. So the next day they had slated her for a full body scan MRI. The next night I was not able to get to the hospital and Betty didn't have a phone in her room. So I called the nurse's station and asked for an update on Betty. And the nurse laughed. She said, oh, Nancy, I'm flipping back and forth between Nancy and Betty. Nancy, she said, we had to send her home. We couldn't find anything wrong with her. The last time I saw Nancy was 6 years after that episode. So she had been 84, still driving herself to service. And she looked at me and she said, you know, my doctor tells me I'm not out of the woods yet. How do we respond to what the universe presents to us, right? A few years ago, there was a TV ad, I think it was for Rexall. It was a man's face being shaved, and the razor went and cut a little cut across his cheek, and the blood began to trickle down. And then across you saw all the products that Rexall sells for cuts and scrapes and bandages and all that stuff. And the voiceover said, until the body heals itself, there's Rexall. And at that point, the blood seeps back into the cut and the cut sealed over. And I thought, how strange, big pharma, the commercial medical establishment is saying, until the body heals itself. We know that, but what limit do we put on the body? How big a cut can it heal? A 1/4 inch cut, a 1/2 inch cut, an 1.5 inch cut? At some point we say, no, the body can't do this on its own. We can always revise that a little bit. So when if we do get a diagnosis, here's a nice little saying to remember. I recognize its existence, but not its permanence. It came to pass, not to stay. So please remember that you are divine. That's your diagnosis, divinity. Use modern medicine or alternative medicine, knowing that all of it is working by the way all of it works is because it stimulates your own body to do its own natural healing, right? Bless your body and love your body, and don't underestimate your body. Know how divine it is, and then know that divine wisdom is always there. So the next time somebody tells you that they have been diagnosed with something, you can always say, well, my diagnosis is divinity. Bless you. Thank you. And so I invite you to enter into prayer time with me, into meditation time. And I'll ask you to place your hands together like this in the prayer position. And just become conscious of that space between the palms of your hands. And you may instantly or not for a while, you may become aware of a sense of movement, of energy there, or of warmth. So whether you can sense that or not, know that as you keep practicing it, you will discover that you can feel it. It's almost like a little pink ball of love. And then in a way you can just imagine it bouncing back and forth between your palms. So knowing about that little ball of energy now, I invite you to place your palms flat down on your thighs. And just sense that energy from your palms warming your thighs, spreading into your thighs, spreading out, flowing down your legs, flowing up your legs, into your body, into your torso, flowing up into your chest, flowing down into your arms, flowing up through your neck and filling your head, energizing your brain, massaging your brain. And that as you become aware of that energy pumping out through your palms, it continues to fill your body with this beautiful energy. And imagine yourself what color that energy is for you, whether it's pink for love, purple for spirit, green for growth, blue for peace? Or is it all of those colors? And it spreads through your body, filling your body, pointing out to you, reminding you that the divine is in every corner of your body, every cell of your body, and that the nature of the divine is perfection. And so as you visualize and create that divinity moving through your body, it is healed and whole. Perfectly in order, all cells functioning just as they should, all systems functioning just as they should. Our digestive system, our elimination system, our blood circulatory system, our respiratory system, all systems working together perfectly, smoothly. And as you visualize your body filled with this energy, this divinity, allow it to seep out through every pore of your body and surround you, surround those around you. And know that you never need to stop this simple pulsing energy moving out into the world. In fact, covering the world, healing the world. So I ask you to sit for just a few moments, breathing and knowing. And please take a very deep breath. Take your attention back to those two little bubbles of energy in your palms. Rub your palms on your thighs now to become fully aware of it. And then bring your palms back together. Breathing deeply. And when you are ready, just allow your eyes to flutter open. Stay.